Hello and welcome to another episode of The Midnight Coder. Now, up until here, everything has been clean. Modules are well structured, responsibilities are clear on paper. So, in this episode, we are going to find out if that design actually survives contact with real code. As we write services with full CRUD operations, this is the point where projects can quietly fall apart. You've added CRUD, logic leaks into controllers, repositories suddenly grow brains, and the architecture that you planned doesn't seem to matter anymore. Architecture doesn't start with frameworks. It starts with decisions. Once you've decided where your logic lives, who depends on whom, and how data moves throughout your system, software engineering becomes a little easier. That's what we're building in this episode. So make sure you've got that full cup of coffee, and let's dive on in. We'll start with the repository, or our interface. What is an interface? An interface is a contract that defines how the application talks to the persistence, not what the application does. So in our case, the JPA repository comes with ways to save and find by. So all that we need to do is set up a contract for deleting a project by an ID, and then Spring will take care of generating the implementation class at runtime. This is what we call Spring magic. So you may be wondering, what logic is allowed here? Data access schematics only, such as CRUD operations, query methods, pagination and sorting, mapping entities to tables. The type of information that does not belong here is business logic or rules, validation, state transitions, conditional workflows, or cross-entity decisions. Repositories answer questions about data. They do not make decisions. For decisions, we look at the service layer of our module. First, we build out the CRUD methods to which we are going to enforce. Create project, read or get project, update project, and delete project. From here, we move to the implementation of the service and how we handle these contracted classes. Right now, they are empty. I'm going to take a little movie magic to add these in so that we don't just waste time watching me type out the not important stuff. There we go. So here, We take in the repository. We fill up our CRUD methods. So as for create, we now simply create a new project. We set up the name based off the request, and we set up the description based off the request. The request just simply contains a name, a description, the owner ID, and the owner's type of the project. So we also need to set up here project dot set owner ID is the request owner ID, and project dot set owner typer. Okay. Yes, we're going to change that to owner type. Let me correct that. Oops. There we go. Perfect. Next, we come down to the read aspect of the CRUD, or where we get project. Here, we simply return the optional if we have it, or else we return a null. We can handle that null in the controller and reply appropriately. Update. Here, we take in the update request. We search to see if the project exists, and if it doesn't, we return a null. If it does, we go ahead and we update the name, and we update the description, and then we save the project. And I am just actually going to take this down here and return it here, because we actually return the in there. We actually here will return the type that we get back. So we will return the cached project that we just updated. And of course, finally, the delete method, where we will just remove the project. So what sort of logic belongs here? Business rules, entity creation, state transitions, validation, business level, not request formats, orchestration across repositories, and exception decisions. Things that do not belong here are HTTP concerns, DTO mappings for API responses, database queries written inline, and request parsing. Services model behavior, not transport, not persistence. Transport, we look into the controller layer, or the part that the users can interact with. Here, we're building an API, so we generally build the request mapping URL to start with that, followed by a version number, followed by the module, pluralized. This version control method is subject to teams, and ways of doing version varies from dev to team to team. When I was learning it, this was the way that I learned, which was best for my needs. So this is open to your own opinions and your own methods for version control. We will also be making some extra assurance that our users that are trying to execute or access the endpoints have specific roles. Just another layer of security, because security is not a single library that you can implement, nor is it a function that you can call. It is layers on layers. Controllers will take in a request, ask the service layer for a reply, and then validate that the reply is not null and map it to a DTO to present to the open world. So, what sort of logic is allowed here? Well, HTTP mappings, request and response translations, status codes, and delegation to services. Things that do not belong here are business rules, persistence calls, conditional workflows, entity manipulation, or validation beyond the request shape. Controllers simply translate. They do not decide. DTO objects. Why these exist? They prevent leaking domain entities to the API. They allow for API evolution without domain breakage. They enforce explicit boundaries, and they're an improvement upon security and clarity. DTOs are not data models. They are contracts that live at the edge. The general non-negotiable rule of thumb is the dependency direction. So this typically goes with controllers, services, and repositories. Controllers depend on services. Services depend on repositories. And repositories don't really depend on anything above. They simply just reply to the chain. In this episode, we have added repositories to access data, services to hold behavior, controllers to expose APIs, as well as DTOs to protect boundaries. And we are very intentional about what logic is allowed in each place. So, next episode is where this stops looking like a demo and starts looking like a real system. Not by adding features for the sake of adding features, but by making the system safe, predictable, scalable. We'll lay the foundation for logging in as a user and creating our first profile. If you've made it this far, thank you very much for watching. I hope that you've learned something. Hit that like button if you did. And if you'd like to learn more, remember to subscribe and turn on that notification bell so that you're notified when I post the next episode or when I go live. You happen to know a friend that may find this series interesting? Go ahead and share it with them as it helps us reach more developers. And as always, keep your curiosity open, your skills sharp, and that coffee cup full. I'll catch you in the next one.